always going to have this full spectrum of emotions. Like that's just the nature of being human, and that's the nature of living the reality that we're living in. So at some point in our lives, even if our parents are trying to protect us from unpleasant things, we're going to feel unpleasant emotions. And so the key really is to accept those emotions, and to accept them in a non-judgmental way. And then once we accept them and sort of acquire the skills to understand what they are, label them, sort of why they're happening, where they're coming from, then it's important to have a toolbox that is unique to us, that can help us manage these emotions.
Crazy.
Ilya, Mel, thank you so much for joining me today for StartUpHealth TV, and this recording will be on the podcast. So thanks for being with me today.
Very cool.
Thanks,
Thank
Logan.
you for having us, Logan.
So we've talked before, and I'm really excited to get an update about Affectifi, this startup that you have built, really helping young people, but people of all ages, with emotional intelligence. And I can tell you that as the father of children who are 9 and 6, I fully ratify the challenge and the need for this in society. So I want to dive right in, but I want to start high level with this idea and the challenge of emotional intelligence, and then we'll get into the company and kind of where you're at now. First of all, how do you define emotional intelligence, and why has this become such a potent issue in 2022?
Sure. Mel, how do you want to do this?
You go first. Go for it.
Well, thanks for having us, Logan. Yeah, so a little bit of background. You know, we've been teaching this course at Columbia Teachers College for a number of years, focused on sort of it's called the cognition of social and emotional learning, and it's sort of gets at the underpinnings of how key skills related to, as you just mentioned, emotional intelligence, how they work, how they develop, and these skills are things like empathy, perspective taking, emotion management or emotion regulation, and there's a lot of names for this sort of overarching set of skills. Emotional intelligence is one. Social and emotional learning is kind of a broad umbrella term that's been used the last couple of decades, related to the development and the teaching of those skills, and in particular in the context of schools, so K through 12 and beyond. And I think you don't need to be a researcher, right, in this area to know how much of an issue this is. And it's been highlighted sort of by the pandemic. It's also been the challenges related to mental health have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and so that experience has sort of brought to the fore the fact that youth mental health and the emotional intelligence skills related to that, it's really been a crisis even prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has just kind of highlighted this issue, and has kind of made it worse. And there's so many ways in which emotional intelligence is important that it's almost difficult to sort of to know where to start. But at a most basic level, right? You can think of it from two sides. One is as a protective factor. So emotional intelligence, with these skills that I mentioned, like empathy and emotion regulation and emotional awareness, it serves as a protective factor. And how does it do that? Well, we encounter emotionally challenging situations every day, right? Whether it's a bad score on the test, whether it's an argument with a parent or a sibling or a teacher or whoever it might be. And having these skills, having the ability to understand what's going on emotionally with yourself and other people, having the ability to manage your own emotions and potentially the emotions of others, that helps you handle those challenges more effectively, more adaptively, okay? And reduces the likelihood of them spiraling out of control, doing things you regret, which then can lead to other consequences, right? And ultimately, it reduces the likelihood of things like mental health crises, reduces the likelihood of, suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, right? So these things that can really have lifelong consequences that can really result in, all kinds of problems besides just the emotional discomfort,
Yeah.
loss of relationships and jobs. So it's a protective factor on the one side, and then it's also a way to help people thrive, right? To help people be more successful. Again, and it comes back to the same thing. Everything, every challenge we encounter in life is really emotional at its core, and having these skills enables you to handle those challenges more effectively, and as a result, make better decisions. Be more successful in achieving your goals, be more successful academically, professionally, having better relationships, healthier relationships. So it has this sort of two-sided set of benefits, both protective and really supportive in helping people succeed.
Yeah.
And as I said, the issue of mental health among youth has been really getting worse over the last couple of decades, even prior to the pandemic. The pandemic's made it worse. And so this is why people have, the last couple of years have really come to realize how important it is to build those skills.
Yeah. Mel, question for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's helpful to understand something by understanding what it's not. And I think about current trends in the emotional development of children. And what I hear you saying is this is about handling emotions versus protecting from emotions. I was reading recently about what people are calling snowplow parenting. This idea of clearing obstacles in front of your child, clearing away the potential for scary emotions and these problems, and then having that create problems down the road without
Yeah.
a child lacking the ability to manage a situation. So it's like what you're describing isn't solving clearing away bad emotions, but what you do when they come, right?
Right, exactly. And so what we have to realize is we have this full spectrum of emotion, and we're always going to have this full spectrum of emotions. Like, that's just the nature of being human, and that's the nature of living the reality that we're living in. So at some point in our lives, even if our parents are trying to protect us from unpleasant things, we're going to feel unpleasant emotions. And so the key really is to accept those emotions, and to accept them in a non-judgmental way. And then once we accept them and sort of acquire the skills to understand what they are, label them, sort of why they're happening, where they're coming from, then it's important to have a toolbox that is unique to us, that can help us manage these emotions. But the point isn't always to just regulate away the unpleasant emotions, right? We talk about this a lot in our class. Emotions exist because they are adaptive, and they're important, and they're telling us something about ourselves and or about the environment outside of us. And so they carry crucial information. And so we shouldn't just ignore them just because they're unpleasant, right? And so the point is to hold all these emotions, hold space for them, sort of ask them what they're trying to tell us, and then have this toolbox to be able to manage them.
So what's really unique here is that this for a long time has been the purview of parents or a guidance counselor or maybe an early childhood educator, and you're taking these principles and you are bringing them to folks at scale, to many more people. So let's talk about how you take the tools of social emotional learning and you create a health tech startup out of it that can actually reach millions of people. So tell us about Affectifi and how you bridge those two worlds.
Yeah, Mel, do you want to start there and I'll chime in?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this pretty much started with our doctoral research at Columbia University. And so, Ilya and I were studying social emotional learning methodologies, testing out what works and what doesn't work, and eventually spearheading our own methodology that has to do with, it. Okay, so there's this idea of deep learning, and this idea exists in the sciences and the learning sciences, the sciences, and also in mathematics. And essentially, what deep learning is that there's this underlying structure to a subject, right, whether it be math or science, that allows us to deeply understand that subject. And when you're faced with problems, sort of get past the surface features and get to the root of what's going on. And so, Ilya and I were really interested in, oh, well, does this deep structure exist for emotions and emotional life? And so, a lot of this research predated our own research. And so what we did was we've combined a lot of what exists in the emotion science. And the methodology that we've created is called deep emotion learning. So it's essentially teaching the underlying cognitive principles of how emotions are generated and regulated. And so this is the core of our curriculum at ThinkHuman, and it's also the core of our technology. And so what's cool about that is that there are these sort of like, the laws of physics, but for emotional life. And we've embedded sort of those emotion principles into our teaching. And they are sort of the core of what drives the curriculum at ThinkHuman. And then, Ilya, you're welcome to add on to that.
Just to clarify, so Affectifi is the company, ThinkHuman is the platform. So maybe we can get into what that looks like for the user.
Yeah. So it's called ThinkHuman TV, and sort of going off of what Mel said, right? So there's research that shows that particularly when you're talking about adolescents, for example, and young adults and beyond. When you're trying to teach them this kind of stuff, emotional intelligence, sort of emotional skills, it's not a great approach to be very prescriptive about it or very didactic. I like to quote this researcher named David Yeager, who wrote that if you sound like their mom when you're trying to teach them this stuff, it shouldn't surprise us that it doesn't work. Of course, not the cool mom that we all. Or a cool parent that we all want.
We all think we are, but we.
But the idea being that it doesn't work to just tell people how to behave. Oh, be nice. What's been shown to be more effective is, particularly for these older kind of learners, is helping them to understand how their emotions work, how their mind works, and then that understanding. We call it kind of like a mental model of your emotional life or your emotional system. Having that be more accurate changes how you think about emotional situations, emotional challenges. And maybe the most famous example of this is Carol Dweck's mindset interventions. This is the idea of incremental theory of ability and all kinds of things. So the notion that your ability isn't fixed or your character isn't fixed, right? That your brain is plastic, and with effort and time, it can change, and so you're not stuck being I'm not good at math, or I'm a victim of bullying. Like, there's everyone changes, right? The bully might stop being a bully, you might stop being a victim. With effort, you'll become better at math, and so that changes how you approach academic failure. You have kind of this healthier attitude towards academics and learning, for example. But all of that is founded on this notion of brain plasticity. You're teaching people about this idea, which is really a principle of how your brain works. And so we've kind of taken that idea, brought it over to the social emotional realm, where we teach this comprehensive model of emotions and the different elements and principles that come into it. Now, how does that what does that actually look like in practice? Well, in ThinkHuman TV, if you start, when you start looking at how do you teach this stuff, how do you teach these principles? Well, what you come to realize is that you can't really teach them in the abstract. You can't just kind of throw them up there and expect for people to really internalize them and make use of them in the real world. You really have to ground those principles in concrete examples of human behavior, human emotions, and what that really means is really to use stories. You're using narrative, and that's very common across sort of programs and approaches to improving emotional skills and social skills is you use stories in various ways. But now the question is, well, what kind of stories do you use? And again, if you're trying to reach and be successful with adolescents, with young adults, and kind of these more sophisticated kind of learners, you want to have content. You want to have stories that they're not just going to roll their eyes at, right? You don't want to have the sort of cheesy edutainment that we've all seen that's often neither too entertaining or too educational. And essentially, if you have these kids kind of rolling their eyes at it, you're losing them, right? And you're kind of losing your chance to teach them something. So then the question is, well, what are the stories that that these kids are, not just kids, but young adults and beyond, that we know that they're going to enjoy, that they're going to engage with, and they're going to be successful in keeping their interest. And of course, these stories, we know where they are. They are on streaming sites. They're on Disney. They're on Netflix. They're on HBO. They're on YouTube and so on. And so that's what ThinkHuman TV really is. It's taking that content that we know is popular, is critically acclaimed, is well made, well acted, emotionally compelling. We know that these young people engage with it voluntarily, and sort of, in a way, ride its coattails, use it as a vehicle to deliver the emotion science learning that we were talking about, these principles, and giving people the opportunity. And this is the third kind of key idea. The third key idea is practice. So you can teach people things, and you can tell them, oh, this is what it is. But if they don't practice thinking about it that way, applying it, it's just, again, we know this from learning science and from just lived experience. It doesn't translate to real skills. Yeah. And so that's the third kind of key idea, is that, well, and another reason why using this kind of media is particularly suitable for this purpose is that you're meeting them where they are. They're already on the streaming sites. Every high school student and every college student has a laptop. They're doing their homework on that laptop. They're on there. They're streaming that content. So they're already there. They have this content that they like. And so there's an opportunity to both use that content and then use it also as a context for practice in order to solidify those skills and to give them the opportunity to really do it over and over and over again. And of course, we've introduced some other elements like gamification and some extrinsic rewards to give them a reason to stick with it. Besides, if they're in K-12 and it's just assigned to them.
Mel, it makes a lot of sense to build on the success of these other narratives that people know and love and build a platform. Have you gotten any pushback, since there is such a conversation going on around screen time and just around an over use of cell phones and too many hours on devices? Is there a pushback against that?
Yeah, I mean, generally, there tends to be the question of are we just adding, more screen time, more technology time, and keeping, adolescents and young adults away from actually being embodied in the world. And, that is valid. That's valid. This is a technological solution. You are on your screen, etc. But we have been getting really great results. Ilya and I have been running efficacy studies. So we ran an efficacy study at Teachers College with graduate level students, and we also ran an efficacy study at LaGuardia University with undergraduate students, so these are younger students. And what we're seeing is actual, our platform is having really great social emotional effects. So after 2 weeks of use, this was at the graduate school level, there was a 22% reduction in emotional suppression as a regulation strategy. And emotional suppression over time, if that's sort of like your default regulation strategy, that can actually lead to poor health outcomes. And so at the undergraduate level, we were seeing that after using ThinkHuman, the students actually had a higher emotion regulation self-efficacy, so way more confidence when managing their emotion. So yes, oh yeah, go ahead.
Talk to me about what that suppression means. I mean, you're using some sort of inside baseball language there. Yeah. If I'm a parent and I want this to just help my kid in some way, what kinds of activities are these beginning to enable in me?
Yeah, so I think one of one of the clearest ways that it's helping, your child, your student, is what's called emotion granularity. So right away, when you're using the system, you're actually learning to label emotions, and you're learning new emotion vocabulary. And so that is extremely important, and it has a regulatory benefit. So not only are you becoming aware of your emotions, but actually labeling emotions and recognizing those emotions via labels in yourself and others, that's regulatory. So that is one of like the immediate the immediate benefits of using ThinkHuman. And then beyond that, you're learning the causes of emotions. So why emotions are existing in the first place. And then later on in the curriculum, you're actually learning concrete regulation strategies.
And I just want to jump in really quick and add to that. One of the key things, also one of the key benefits, even if let's say you're doing the exercises and you're getting them wrong, let's say, what we're having the learner do is that we're asking them to pause and reflect as they're watching. So what happens is, you're getting this exercise, it pauses playback, and you're reflecting on what's going on with the character and potentially with yourself. We also have self-reflection exercises. And that act of pausing and reflecting is one of the most important things, one of the most important skills, is habit of reflection to develop for both developing awareness of emotions in yourself, which is the very first step toward regulation, and emotions in others, which is the first step toward empathy and toward managing interactions and relationships. So that's, and this goes back to this idea of practice. So this over and over again. And this also connects the idea that you brought up earlier, Logan, of sort of the pushback. And sort of one of the answers to that as well, to add to what Mel said, is that the kids are already on the screens. Yeah. They're already there. So but now they can be on the screen and get some additional benefit out of it, right? They can develop these skills like emotion labeling and reflection and so on. So we're kind of adding this layer of emotional benefit to what's already happening, and basically you're as a parent, Logan, you sort of, you give in. There's no escape.
It's going to happen no matter what.
It's going to happen. But now you can have a way to both actually help the kids develop these key skills and make yourself feel better.
Yeah, we actually have these high school interns that help us out, help us prepare the narratives for Disney Plus and Netflix and Peacock, etc. And their parents are like, "Oh, we actually are so excited about them using Netflix now because we know they're getting something out of it."
Yeah, interesting.
And we are actually, something we may have mentioned is that we're on the cusp of getting this phase 2 NSF grant, and part of that grant is actually going to be work to develop solutions for younger audiences, like kids that you mentioned, that you have your age and my age, kids my age as well. I have a 6-year-old, for example. So developing an experience aimed at those age groups, and one that actually works with TVs, not just laptops or computers.
You've had a successful K-12 experiment in New York City. What would it look like to really scale this up? I mean, you're building a platform that can affect children at scale because it's a tech platform. What does that look like for a nationwide system of public schools and other independent schools?
Yeah, so that's we're asking that same question. Well, we're in the process of developing that process, and in part, it's about both facilitating the integration of the technology. So it's at present it's a browser extension. So that means some technological hurdles. Making sure that, for example, a school district clears that browser extension to get it installed, which is not particularly complicated, but it is a process. And then I would say probably the bigger and more important one is to ensure that the teachers or educators of different stripes, or maybe health educators and maybe counselors, are prepared and supported in using the technology, and so that's something that we're working on, as well as providing additional support, and we're doing it in a couple of different ways, both offering an educator guide that offers suggested activities and prompts for use in the classroom. We're also actually working with a professor at University of Oregon, Mark Van Bryzen, who is a specialist in cooperative learning, and we're working with him to develop lessons that facilitate, that are designed based on cooperative learning principles to enable students to do these kinds of group activities that really help them both deepen the understanding of the emotion science principles, but also do so in a way that, again, conforms with these cooperative learning principles that on their own, just learning in that way, supports social and emotional development. So it ensures that every student participates, it ensures that everybody has their role, and so that's another thing that we're doing is developing this kind of set of lessons that teachers could just take and use in conjunction with the platform.
I want to return to something, unfortunately, because my connection cut out and you kept talking and I believe it kept recording, but in case it didn't, I want to make sure I get something recorded, which is, and maybe Mel, you can answer this. I want you to actually walk me through what I missed was sort of the exact description of watching a show, having the pause moment, a list of emotions. So can you kind of explain exactly what the experience is? Give me a sample show that it could work with, and what might my experience be?
Yeah, of course. So, you go to the ThinkHuman website, you could sign up, and then you download the browser extension, which works on Chrome. And there's a bit of an onboarding process. So say you're on Netflix, right? Basically, you're going to see the extension on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and then there's a bit of an overlay tray on the right side of the screen, and it'll tell you sort of how ThinkHuman works and whatnot, and then you get sort of like a few questions, onboarding questions, like, are you interested in family relationships? Are you interested in school relationships and work? And then it'll give you a list of the narratives that ThinkHuman supports, depending on which streaming service you're on. And so if you're on Netflix, you can choose a show like Never Have I Ever, or you can choose The Queen's Gambit. And so you click on that show, and then via the extension, and it takes you to the show. And there are a few ways of engaging with ThinkHuman. And so you can sort of just start watching the show as you normally would. And then at intervals, these emotion science activities are going to pop up. So say it's an emotion labeling question. It'll say, if you're watching Never Have I Ever, it'll say, you'll watch the scene. The question will pop up, and the question will say there's a focus on Debbie, who's the main character in Never Have I Ever, and then it'll say, when this character says this to Debbie, what's Debbie's likely emotional reaction here, right? And so then you'll get a list of emotions, and you'll get to click on those emotions, and then you'll see how your answer compares to other users' answers. And this is sort of a crowdsourced type question, and we have a few of those crowdsourced type questions on the platform. And then we have other questions that pop up where there is a right answer. Anyway, so you answer these questions, and then once you answer the question, sort of playback resumes, and you could continue watching the show. Another way to engage with it is on the right-hand side of the screen where the extension is, you'll actually see the times for the different scenes that have emotion science activities. So instead of just like sitting through the whole narrative and waiting for the activities to pop up, a faster way to go through the system is to actually click directly on those scenes and go to the emotion science activities themselves.
Got it.
So a few ways to interact with the platform, a bit more of a natural experience where you're just watching the show and activities pop up, or a faster experience where you're actually navigating to those segments that have emotion science activities.
And one quick thing to note is that the system allows for, it's designed to allow for really flexibility, choice, and personalization. What that means is you're not forced to watch any one title first and there's not any one sequence of titles, right? You are free to jump between titles as you see fit. You can watch Star Wars on Disney. You can go back to Netflix and watch Never Have I Ever. And you can do that, as much as you want, and you will seamlessly progress through the training program, the default training program that we have for, high school and college. So you will get the appropriate exercise given your progress through the training and given the content that you're watching. So it gives you as a user or as an educator this flexibility and this choice so that you're not, forced to go down some particular path.
Awesome. All right, quick final question. We've talked about your successful K-12 pilot, and you're working on this SBIR grant, I understand. So a lot happening right now. What are you most excited about the next phase? What are you working on that's coming up next? Mel, why don't you start?
Ooh, I don't know if we could give away any secrets yet. I'm most excited about, we're really looking to ramp up our sales. We were talking about getting into K-12, but we're also really excited about higher education. And a new update I don't think we have mentioned is that we just recently partnered with the JED Foundation. And they provide mental health resources to, colleges, universities, as well as K through 12. And so they're a really exciting distribution partner for us, and we're just kicking off things with them. So I'm really excited about that.
Nice. Ilya?
Yeah, there's so we're part of this grant is aimed at developing more collaborative and more creative training. So when I say creative, the term we actually use is constructive. It's a more like inside baseball again term of basically giving the user the ability to suggest their own answer rather than pick from a list. And then more collaboration where you get feedback from other users, essentially peer review of these answers. And so that's actually going to produce deeper learning, better outcomes, and more engagement. We're excited about that. And then the other piece that I kind of briefly touched on is working on expanding the experience to younger viewers and doing so in the context of your TV and not just the computer. So that's a big direction that we're working on.
And of course, the moonshot vision is to actually one day work with the streaming services themselves, work with content producers, work with writers, directors, and actors to sort of really integrate all of these worlds and fully respect the art as we do so. So that is a dream, but a dream that's in the future for now.
Awesome. Well, it's a great dream. Mel, Ilya, co-founders of Affectifi, makers of ThinkHuman TV, excited to get this this update from you, to hear how you're working with these schools, and you're on Peacock and all these great updates. So I'm excited to hear what comes next, and really appreciate the work you're doing to help young people.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks very much.
All right, take care. Be well. We'll catch up soon.
Right.
Quick word about this show, in case you're new around here. At Startup Health, we believe in broadcasting the stories of health moonshot progress, the stories of the most forward-thinking entrepreneurs in health. If you want more of this good news about healthcare's problem solvers, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, hit that notification button, and follow us on social media at Startup Health.